The following audio presentation is a production of Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, in association with the Division of Continuing Studies and the Institute on Ethnicity, Culture, and the Modern Experience. This production was originally funded by the New Jersey Historical Commission and has been remastered by the Rutgers ITV studio.
This is a hat of a Pullman Porter, and here we have the jacket of a Pullman Porter.
Carefully, almost tenderly, Ted Brunson holds up the special uniform that was the badge of the Pullman Porters, the black service attendants who rode the rails and tended to passengers from the 1860s until the 1960s, the golden age of the railroad. The single-breasted jacket is smartly styled. The cap with its brass insignia reads Pullman Porter, an elite symbol among the generations of men whose lives were dedicated to service on the railroad.
I'm here to serve you. Any service that you desire, any hour, day or night, just ring for me. I'm always at your service, your Pullman Porter.
Ted Brunson reads one of the many advertisements produced by the Pullman Sleeping Car Company to promote the personal service that passengers expected and received on their luxury train cars. Pullman Porter memorabilia like this comprised an exhibit several years ago at the Afro-American History Society Museum in Jersey City, of which Brunson is the former director. It holds a special meaning, too. Brunson's uncle was a Pullman Porter. And in the days when everyone rode the trains, New Jersey, he says, was a hub of railroad activity.
During the 1920s, most of the railroads from the south and from the west came into Jersey City. They came into Jersey City, and because they didn't have tunnels to go under the Hudson River, and they stopped here. Out of every 5 families that lived in Jersey City, almost half of them had relatives who worked on the railroad. Many of the Pullman Porters were well-educated men. Many of them had their college degrees, and they were the biggest things around at least in terms of the black community.
The legacy of black railroad workers begins in 1863 with Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation Act. Freed slaves who left the plantations went searching for employment, but found little other than the domestic positions or manual labors which they had become accustomed to doing. That changed following the Industrial Revolution, when the railroad sleeping car was developed to make the rails useful not only for freight transportation but for passenger travel. The Pullman Sleeping Car Company pioneered this development and found cheap labor in signing up former slaves as service attendants on the luxury cars.
Gonna ride that train, I'm in that Pullman passenger train. Gonna buy me a ticket just as long as my arm. I'm gonna ride that train, babe, all night long. Gonna ride that train, I'm in that Pullman passenger train.
Beginning in 1868, the Pullman Company exclusively employed black males for nearly a century as porters. The porter was the heart of the new luxury cars, a model of first-class service. Diligent and gracious, he tended the sleeping berths and performed countless services for passengers. The late Benjamin McLaurin was a Pullman porter and the East Coast director of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. His memories have been recorded and preserved in the archives of the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, part of the New York Public Library.
A Pullman porter's job at that time was one of the most successful jobs in America. As a matter of fact, there were just full jobs that made it possible for Negroes to be certain of making a decent living. You either had to be a red cap, a dining car waiter, a Pullman porter, or a mail clerk. As a matter of fact, at one time, there were more blacks carrying bags in the Pennsylvania station with PhDs than you had teaching school all over the South. The jobs didn't really pay very much. You had to depend on tips. I remember when I became a Pullman porter, my salary for 400 hours of work per month was $65. Well, since you had to depend on tips from the passengers, you had to appear to be happy all the time. You could be dying inside, but that smile had to be there because the passengers looked for it.
According to McLaurin, reliance on tips forced porters to perform onerous jobs and often suffer insults and racial slurs, always with a smile. He babysat children, shined shoes, cleaned ashtrays, and ironed suits. And he still had to find the time to polish the wood and brass of the Pullman Company's elegant railroad sleeping cars. If a passenger complained, the porter faced a harsh reprimand, a dock and pay, even dismissal. Pullman porters also had to cope with inadequate working conditions, according to Joseph Wilson, a professor of political science at Brooklyn College and an authority on the history of the porters.
They didn't have regular wages and frequently cheated out of wages completely by management. They didn't have a place to sleep, even though they tended the sleeping cars. They would have to sleep in the boxcar or in a smoker car where, constantly filled with tobacco products, cigar smoke, etc.
The terrible inequities finally prompted them to unionize. 500 Pullman porters met with black labor leader A. Philip Randolph in New York City in August 1925 and formed the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. When the company caught wind of it, the porters faced serious retaliation.
They were humiliated, insulted by management, summarily fired, threatened and brutalized for suggesting that they would organize in unions.
I remember the time in Denver, Colorado, during the days we were attempting to organize, when a porter out of Chicago got fired because one of the Pullman officials got on the train in Denver and said that this man looked too much like a Chinaman.
For the next 12 years, they organized secretly, without the support of black leadership and churches, and often under the guise of tea parties held by the Ladies' Auxiliary. Former porter Benjamin McLaurin remembers.
Had it not been for the support of the women, the organization may never have succeeded. When the company put the pressure on the porters, it was the wives who would circulate the bulletins and the information to the porters from time to time.
The Pullman Company also paid millions to keep the porters down, including donations to black churches. McLaurin vividly remembers how they offered Randolph a blank check to abandon the porters.
The Pullman Company, through one of its company men, brought to the Brotherhood's office here in New York, and this is not hearsay, I saw the check. The check was a blank check, the express purpose of Phil Randolph signing to call off his efforts to organize the porters, and he could sign up to the tune of $1 million. Mr. Randolph framed the check, took a picture of it, sent the check back, and said there wasn't a membership for sale in the Brotherhood.
Randolph and the Union prevailed. In 1937, the Brotherhood finally signed a contract with the Pullman Company. Starting pay increased from $65 to $150 a month. Instead of working 400 hours, the contract reduced time on the rails to 240 hours a month. The Brotherhood became the nation's first successful black labor union.
I have a dream this afternoon.
Empowered by this labor victory, Randolph moved into the civil rights arena, culminating in the landmark 1963 March on Washington. Randolph and the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters became the organizing forces behind the 1963 march, which helped launch the career of Dr. Martin Luther King.
In terms of turning out the troops and mobilizing at the local area, the porters played a tremendous role in the March on Washington. And of course that led to the omnibus civil rights legislation. They linked unionism and union activism with civil rights and civil rights activism, and in a way that could include broad areas of the American public. And that, I guess the rest is history.
The Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters is now history as well. In 1979, it merged with the Railway and Airline Clerks Union. Today, the distinctive uniform and cap have vanished from the railroad cars, but the porters' historic legacy endures. For New Jersey Times, I'm Marisa Pearson.